It all started when Martin secretly invited me to the garage. That day was just like any other. Robert was at work, and Martin was messing around with his bike. I, on the other hand, was at home, lost in my usual boring routine, trying not to lose my excitement for life. I was 45, but I still thought I looked attractive when I looked in the mirror. I had kept in shape and proudly wore the marks that time had left on me. Martin, though, was pure youth, energy in motion. In his early 20s, handsome, confident, and full of passion for bikes, you could hear the echoes of that passion with every rev of his engine coming from the garage. But today, those sounds felt different, like they were pulling me toward the garage. I quietly peered out the window. Martin was back at it, his hands greasy and his face lightly sweaty as he worked on his bike, completely focused. It was impossible not to notice the way his muscles moved as he leaned over the bike, working on it. A sudden surge of excitement and a fleeting thrill hit me. Then he looked up and caught my gaze, grinning. "Want to come over, Emily?" he asked. I froze for a moment. His voice, the warmth in it, and the certainty in his eyes completely rooted me to the spot. I didn't know what to say, but I nodded lightly, and before I knew it, I was walking toward the garage door. The simple invitation didn't seem like it would kickstart such a big mess, but I would soon learn how wrong I was. As I walked toward the garage, the turmoil inside me grew stronger. Martin, being this young and charismatic, shouldn't have surprised me considering he was Robert's son, but he was my stepson. I kept reminding myself of that, but I couldn't shake the thought. Every step made my conscience scream louder. "What are you doing, Emily?" I asked myself. "He's just a young guy with a passion for bikes. You live in the same house as him, you're part of his family. Feeling like this isn't normal." But still, I couldn't get that look out of my mind, Martin's smile, the warmth in his voice, the casual yet magnetic way he carried himself. This was so wrong, and I knew it. Robert loved me and trusted me. The thought of betraying him made my stomach turn. I knew he didn't deserve to be hurt after all the years he'd spent by my side, giving me peace. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't deny the strange pull I felt toward Martin. The closer I got to the garage, the more my thoughts took over. This is just a moment of weakness, I tried to convince myself. Everyone thinks like this sometimes. The important thing is not to give in. But deep down, there was a voice I couldn't silence. "What if you give in?" Martin stood by his bike, waiting for me, that typical indifferent yet charming look on his face. There was meaning in his eyes, though maybe that's just what I wanted to see. I took a deep breath, trying to gather myself. I thought being here wouldn't change anything. I'd have a little chat, stay for a few minutes, and then leave. But why was my heart racing like this? I was angry with myself. I shouldn't even have entertained the idea of being affected by Martin. It wasn't just his youth or his attractiveness, it was the possibility of crossing that forbidden line that both scared and excited me. It would be betrayal to Robert and to myself. But here I was, stepping into the garage without resolving the turmoil inside me. When Martin noticed me, he stopped working on the bike and stood up, wiping the black oil stains off his hands with a rag. He gave me a small smile. "Is something wrong, Emily?" he asked, his voice as calm as usual but with a bit of curiosity. "No, actually, I was just watching you," I said, immediately feeling embarrassed at how too familiar my words sounded. "I mean, I was just curious how much you're working on the bike." Martin raised his eyebrows slightly, but his smile deepened. "Yeah, it takes a lot of time, but I love it. You know, my dad likes it too." "Robert never has time for stuff like this," I said, maybe trying to shift the topic to something easier. "Yeah," Martin said, lowering his gaze back to the bike, his voice carrying a hint of sadness. "He's really focused on his work, but I guess I'm a bit different." The silence between us didn't last long. Martin pointed at a stool and suggested I sit down. "Relax, don't wear yourself out just by watching me," he said with a playful tone. I knew I should laugh, but in that moment, I couldn't push down the storm inside me. Being near him, feeling that quiet confidence, both relaxed and stressed me out at the same time. As I sat on the stool, my eyes drifted to his hands still working on the bike. Those hands, full of youthful energy, also showed how passionate he was about what he was doing. "You really look like your dad," I said, trying to steer the conversation in a different direction. Martin stopped and looked at me. "Really? That's the first time anyone said that. People usually say I look more like my mom." "Maybe you look more like your mom on the outside, but some of your mannerisms are definitely like Robert's," I said. My words surprised me. I hadn't even realized I'd been watching him so closely. Martin paused for a moment, like he was evaluating what I just said. Then he shrugged and smiled. "Well, I guess that's not a bad thing, right?" "No," I mumbled, but I couldn't hide the doubt in my voice. Our closeness was growing. The conversations were light but also strangely deep. Every word Martin said, every smile, triggered a different feeling inside me. Each moment in that garage was bringing us a little closer. At one point, when he leaned over the bike, his arm accidentally brushed against my leg. It was just a brief moment, but it left a deep impact. My heart started racing, but he kept working like nothing happened. "Emily," he said after a while, turning toward me. "How are you doing? I mean, how's everything with my dad?" That question caught me off guard. For a brief moment, I didn't know what to say. "Good," I said finally, but then. In my voice was obvious Robert's working. "Same as usual, I'm just trying to keep myself busy." A strange look appeared on Martin's face. It was like he was weighing every word I said. "Do you ever feel lonely?" he asked, his voice low but direct. I didn't know how to answer that question. For a moment, my eyes met his dark ones. "Yeah," I admitted, "I guess so." Martin took a step closer to me, not breaking eye contact for a second. "You don't have to feel that way," he said, his voice deep and soft. "I'm here." It was such a simple sentence, but it had such a heavy impact on me. For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe from the weight of the moment. The silence in the garage made the tension in the air even more obvious. When I felt Martin drop the rag in his hand and move a little closer, my emotions were storming inside me. This kind of closeness wasn't right, but I couldn't find the strength to stop it. Martin, still leaning over the bike, wiping the oil stains with the rag, turned and silently looked at me for a while. His gaze was different from usual. It was like he wanted to say something but was carefully choosing his words. "Emily," he finally said, his voice a bit hesitant but firm, "my dad's not coming today." For a few seconds, I didn't fully understand what he meant. "What do you mean he's not coming?" "He was supposed to be here after work," I said, my voice a bit confused. Martin shrugged lightly. "He called. There's a meeting that came up, and he's going to be at the office until late. He might come home late or maybe not at all. He didn't say much." The news left me with a strange mix of relief and weird tension. Robert not being there meant we'd be alone in the garage. Martin's calm delivery made me feel uneasy, but in a strange way, excited. Martin turned back to the bike, but after a few seconds, he stopped again and looked at me. "By the way," he said, a slight smile appearing on his face, "I'm going to ask you for something, but don't take it the wrong way." "What kind of something?" I asked a little cautiously. "My hands are all oily, and I've gotten grease all over my shirt," he said, pointing to the stains. "I don't want to get these oil marks on your clothes. Can you help me take off my shirt?" His words sounded totally innocent, but something inside me started to stir. Why did such a simple request make me feel this way? I scolded myself as I stood up and walked over to him. "Sure," I said, trying to keep my voice as normal as possible. I grabbed the bottom of his shirt and started to slowly lift it up. Martin lifted his arms to make it easier for me, but in doing so, I ended up getting closer to his skin. As I pulled the shirt over his head, my fingers accidentally brushed his shoulder. His skin was warm and surprisingly smooth. When I finally got the shirt off, I realized I had been holding my breath. The muscular body of the young man standing in front of me felt more real than anything. In that moment, I felt embarrassed to be standing so close. I was close to him, but strangely that embarrassment did stop me. "Thanks, Martin," I said, a relaxed smile on his face. Sometimes these things are harder than they look, especially when there's no one around to help. I was pissed at myself. Why did something so simple turn into something so complicated? But then Martin leaned in a little, giving me a slight smile as he looked into my eyes. "Emily, you look kind of tense." "You good?" he asked. "I'm good," I said quickly, but I couldn't hide the tremble in my voice. I tried to look away, hoping he'd stop staring, but Martin didn't move. "All right then," he said, turning back to the bike. "If you keep helping, we'll get done faster." His words seemed normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he knew about the tension between us. Being this close to this young guy was like a knot in my chest I couldn't untangle. I moved a little closer to the bike, my eyes drifting to the details Martin was working on while I tried to push down the unease crawling inside me. Knowing Robert wasn't coming made this moment feel both freer and more dangerous. "Martin," I said, hesitating a bit, "I want to sit on the bike and see what it feels like. I've always wondered what it's like to ride one of these." Martin looked up and smiled. "Sure, why not? But be careful, the foot peg might slip." I stepped closer to the bike and tried to sit on it, but I wobbled and almost lost my balance. Martin quickly appeared beside me, his hands firmly on my waist, steadying me. "Slow down," his voice mixed with a little laugh. "You're going to fall." The feel of his strong hands on my waist surprised me, but what was even more surprising was the intensity of the feeling it stirred in me. I froze for a second, and when our eyes met, I couldn't tell if I wanted to speak or run away. "I guess I didn't sit right," I said with a small smile, but my voice was low and shaky. "If it's your first time sitting on one of these, it's normal," Martin said, his eyes still locked on mine. "Let me help you a bit." He placed his hands back on my waist to help me sit more comfortably, and gently lifted me up, trying to settle me properly. In the process, our faces got dangerously close for a moment. Neither of us moved, our breathing filled the silence as we stared into each other's eyes. At that point, all my logic felt like it had flown out the window. Martin's face came even closer, or maybe I leaned in toward his before I even realized what was happening. Our lips met. At first, it was slow and hesitant, but soon both of us lost control, and the moment took over. I suddenly pulled back, gasping for air. This is wrong," I said, but my voice didn't sound convincing at all. Martin looked at me, his face showing both surprise and a faint smile. "Emily," he whispered, but didn't continue. I got off the bike, trying to silence the chaos inside me, and took a few steps back, avoiding Martin's gaze. I knew this moment was irreversible. I moved a little closer to the bike, my eyes drifting to the details. Tails, Martin was working on while I tried to push down the uneasy flutter inside me, knowing Robert wasn't coming, made this moment feel both freer and riskier. "Martin," I said, hesitating a little, "I want to sit on the bike and see what it feels like. I've always wondered what riding one is like." Martin looked up and smiled. "Sure, why not, but be careful, the foot peg might slip." I stepped up to the bike and tried to sit on it but wobbled and almost lost my balance. Martin quickly appeared beside me, his hands on my waist, steadying me. "Slow down," he said, his voice laced with a soft laugh. "You're gonna fall." The feel of his strong hands on my waist surprised me, but what surprised me even more was how intense the feeling was. I froze for a second, and when our eyes locked, I didn't know if I wanted to speak or run away. "I guess I didn't sit right," I said with a small smile, but my voice was low and shaky. "If it's your first time sitting on one of these, it's normal," Martin said, still looking into my eyes. "Let me help you a bit." His hands found my waist again, guiding me to sit properly, gently lifting me up as he did. Our faces got dangerously close for a moment, neither of us moved. Our breaths filled the silence as we stared at each other. At that point, all logic had left me. Martin's face moved even closer, or maybe I leaned in toward his. Before I even knew what was happening, our lips met. At first, it was slow and hesitant, but soon both of us lost control, and the moment took over. I suddenly pulled back, out of breath. This is wrong," I said, but my voice wasn't convincing at all. I could feel the cold metal of the bike under my back. Martin's gaze felt heavy on me, but at the same time, it made me feel the inevitability of this moment. I took a deep breath, trying to suppress all the contradictions inside me, and leaned back a little on the bike. "Emily," Martin whispered, his voice unsure but so damn tempting. His eyes moved from mine to my lips, then back to my eyes. My hand reached out involuntarily and touched his arm. Maybe we should just stay in the moment," I said, my voice almost like a confession. Martin paused for a second, as if trying to force some logic back into his head, but then his hands carefully placed themselves on my sides, and he moved his face even closer to mine. Our lips met again, this time much bolder and uncontrolled, as his lips trailed from mine to my neck. I closed my eyes, every detail of the bike, the cold metal, the smell of gasoline, all made this moment feel even more real. His warm breath on my skin made my heart race. When Martin pulled me closer, my position on the bike had completely surrendered to him. No matter how much logic screamed inside me, I knew I couldn't suppress the passion I felt in this moment. His touch, his gaze, his breath, everything was wiping my mind clean, drowning in my own chaos. The reality of this moment was pulling me in even deeper. We were both out of breath. The heat between us was making the air feel almost suffocating. I closed my eyes, trying to take a deep breath, trying to make sense of it all, but my mind was blurry, lost in a sea of thoughts. What happened? What did we just do? The mix of confusion and guilt inside me was replaced by a strange daze. I was sure I'd never felt something like this before, this intense, this powerful. Martin's breath was still on my skin, and he was looking at me like he wanted to say something. But what could he say? Or what could I say to him? The silence between us carried the weight of thousands of words, but neither of us could bring ourselves to speak. Fighting with myself, I tried to get off the cold metal of the bike. My knees were shaking, and my heart was pounding like crazy. I took a few steps toward the corner of the garage, trying not to look back. How could I explain how far we'd gone? But in that moment, Martin's gaze pierced somewhere deep inside me. I knew this moment had opened an irreversible path.